Hey guys, welcome to my channel once again, and I'm Matrix, where research is simplified and interest are working. In today's video, we'll be looking at research methodology, which happens to be a common pain for most students, especially those new to the field. Thus, we'll be covering all things related to research methodology and the major common question asked by most students, which will help you understand research methodology better and make an informed choice on it. So guys, quickly grab a cup of coffee, a pen and book, and let's quickly zoom into today's episode. Hey, but don't forget to click on the subscribe button and the notification bell if today is your first time joining us. Great. Let's start first with the basic question: what is research methodology in the simplest term? In simple terms, research methodology is the doing chapter in a thesis or dissertation. At this point, you would have probably undergone 2 chapters depending on the nature of your thesis, where you would have looked at your introduction, which basically captures the background of the study, and you would have also discussed previous literatures relating to your work. As such, it becomes relatively clear to the reader, the examiner, or the reviewer what your research is about, the general questions or objectives of your research. Thus, this chapter now tells the reviewers or readers that you probably know what your research is and how you're going to answer those questions you spoke 2 or more chapters justifying and explaining. Research methodology simply refers to the practicalities of how you went and undertook your specific or any given piece of research. More specifically, it's about how a researcher systematically designs a study to measure valid and reliable results that address the research aims and objectives. For example, how did the researcher go about deciding on 1, what data to collect and what data to ignore, which can be captured under the umbrella quantitative or qualitative data. 2, who or where to collect this data from in research, and this can be captured as sampling design. The third is how to collect it, which is also captured as data collection method. And the last but not the least is how to analyze this, which is also captured as data analysis method. Let me be quick to say that in a dissertation, thesis, academic journal, or any pretty much formal piece of research, you would find a research methodology chapter or session which covers the aspects mentioned above. Importantly, a good research methodology chapter in a dissertation or thesis explains not just what methodologically choices were made, but also explain why they were made. In other words, the methodology chapter should justify the design choice by showing that the chosen method and techniques are the best fit for the research aim and objective, and also provide valid and reliable results. A good research methodology provides scientifically sound findings, whereas a poor methodology doesn't provide scientifically sound findings, which we will look at the main design for choosing or deciding between the choice for a good research methodology. The next line of question we want to tackle is qualitative, quantitative, and mixed method methodology. What is the difference that lies between these methodologies? I believe this happens to be one of the most common terminologies we are most probably or likely to chance upon as we go through the various journal articles or thesis or dissertation. The major question that is being posed here is how to distinguish between them, and these are faced by most students. Now, to think about who is most likely to face such problem of distinguishing between the data are those mainly found in the field of businesses or social sciences. Because, for instance, if you are in the sciences or in the engineering, it is very lucky and most likely to deal with solely quantitative data, since there is nothing of qualitative data. That is to say that most of the data that are being dealt with by the sciences are those that are categorical, are those that are measured. But if you happen to find yourself in the businesses or social sciences, then yes, you do have to be explicit about the kind of data that you have or you are going to use. So basically, to answer this, we will want to say that quantitative or qualitative or even mixed method are different types of methodology, distinguished by whether they focus on words, numbers, or both. I believe this is a bit of oversimplification, but it's a good starting point for understanding. However, let's take a closer look. Now, to distinguish between qualitative and quantitative. First, I want to say that qualitative research refers to research which focus on collecting and analyzing words, which may be in the form of written or spoken, and textual data, okay? Whereas quantitative data basically also focus on the measurement and testing using numerical data. Generally, we can say that quantitative research usually found or are found within the realms of numbers or data which is quantifiable or numeric, whereas qualitative is in the realms of ideas, whereas phrases. Yes, basically. So that is the first point of distinction between qualitative and quantitative data or methodology. The next thing I want to notify here, but before that, let me be quick to say that qualitative analysis can also focus on other softer data points such as body language or visual elements. Now, the next point of distinction or difference between qualitative and quantitative data is that for most qualitative methodology to be used, when the research aim and objective are exploratory in nature. For example, a qualitative methodology might be used to understand people's perception about an event that took place or a candidate running for president. Contrary to this, a quantitative methodology is typically used when research aims and objectives are confirmatory in nature. Now here, for example, a quantitative methodology might be used to measure the relationship between two variables, say personality type and likelihood to commit a crime, or to test a set of what? Hypotheses. Right. So these are the two major stance points for distinguishing between qualitative and quantitative methodologies or data. Having said this, let me be quick to say that it is important to know whether your data is quantitative, qualitative, or mixed, because that is essential in telling you a bit about your philosophy. When I say philosophy or research philosophy simply means the angle at which you are going to be looking at your research question, okay? The two mainstream of philosophies that people typically end up coming from is the positivist paradigm or the interpretivist paradigm. The positivist paradigm of philosophy happens to have researchers that has a theory or hypothesis or inference, and they are going to use data to test such hypothesis, okay? And that is what we term as the positivist, okay? Yes, you have a data already, but we have already existing hypothesis in place, and therefore you want to use your data to test. So it falls in the line of confirmatory, as we have already made mention of. Either you are going to confirm those hypotheses to be true or not true, okay? So basically that is the positivist paradigm of philosophy or research philosophy, an angle that you might be coming from, okay? On the other hand is the interpretivist paradigm, where the data is rather used to generate a theory or an hypothesis. Okay, in this case, the data is rather used to propel or propound for a theory. Okay, in this case, the data available is rather used to propound for theories, okay, or hypothesis, unlike the positivist that is used to test the theories or hypotheses already in place or in existence. So in the nutshell, we can say the positivist paradigm of philosophy leads towards quantitative approach, whilst the interpretivist leads towards a qualitative approach. Yeah, basically. So that sums up the level of distinction or differences between the qualitative methodology and the quantitative methodology. Yes, I believe you are right here with me and you are following. Now, let me be quick also to say that I believe your guess might be right, that the mixed methodology attempt to combine the best of both qualitative and quantitative methodology to interrogate perspective and create a rich picture. In other words, the mixed method methodology is a hybrid of the qualitative data and the qualitative data. So it's just a combination of the two. Now, let me note that the direction of your study or philosophy plays a critical role in answering your research question. Okay, the direction of it plays a critical role or an important role in answering your research question, which happens to be the engine of your study. Okay, so this sum up or gives a pretty overview idea of why we should understand the various methodologies, such as the qualitative, the quantitative, and the mixed method methodology. By so doing, you get to know the angle or the research philosophy you should come from, whether from a positivist approach or angle or from an interpretivist approach. Okay, with that in place, you'll be able to know how best to answer your research questions so that you produce the best of research or robust studies. Now, having understanding of qualitative, quantitative, and mixed method methodology, the next line of question that comes into mind is who or where to collect this data from. And that leads out to our next point of question. What are the main sampling design approaches? As mentioned earlier, sampling design is about deciding who or where you are going to collect your data from. Let me be quick to say that there are many sample options, but the two main categories of sampling design are probability sampling and non-probability sampling. Whenever sampling comes into mind, the next thing is sample and population. Sample here basically refers to a fraction of the population of which we are going to understudy or deduce our conclusion from. And the population refers to the entire study target, okay, the entire study target we are going to make deduction from. For instance, if I want to conduct a study on Uber drivers within a particular country, then the entire number of Uber drivers then become my population. But because of certain limitation or challenges, I might not be able to cover every Uber driver. Therefore, there comes in the need to sample, that is to get a fraction or a fair representation out of the entire population, and that becomes our sample. That comes the word sampling. So the process of you trying to get a sample out of a population is deemed as sampling. Okay, so as mentioned earlier on, sampling design is about deciding who or where you are going to collect your data from. That is your sample. So quickly, probability sampling means that you use a completely random sample from the group of people you are interested, which is called the population, as I said. By using completely random sample, the result of your study will be generalizable to the entire population. In other words, you can expect same results. You can expect same results across the entire group without having to collect data from the entire group, which is often not possible for large groups. As I said, we wouldn't be able to gather all information from every Uber driver, but if you have a random probability sampling, then you can get a fair representation out of the entire population, which you can generalize your results. Okay. The next one is non-probability sampling. On the other hand, does not use random sample. For example, it might involve using a convenience sample, which means you use interview or survey people that you have access to, perhaps your friends, family, or work colleagues, rather than a truly random sample, which might be difficult to achieve due to resources constraints. With non-probability sampling, the results are typically not generalizable. Okay, so for non-probability, it can be based on convenience. Okay, can be based on convenience because of my friends, maybe who knows an Uber driver, I can use them as a point whereby I can deduce some information from them. But because it was not a random sample, I cannot generalize. That is what basically we stand to communicate as far as non-probability sampling is concerned. Note here, don't forget to put across your justification for a choice of sampling design. Okay, so for instance, if you are not able to use probability sampling and for you want to go ahead with non-probability sampling, as in the case I gave, you want to undertake a study on Uber drivers, how they are treating or the satisfaction level of customers who pick Uber cars. Okay, and because of challenges, let's say within this COVID season, you cannot go out and interview or pick up information from these drivers. Definitely want to use what we call convenient way, which is a non-probability sampling. So people you think you know, friends and families which you know or believe might have picked an Uber car before, can be used to answer those questions whereby you deduce those information from. Okay, that is why we are saying there should be the need or it's a must to justify for a choice of sampling design. Now, being able to draw your sample from your population by either using the probability sampling method or the non-probability sampling method, the next thing that comes into mind is how to collect this information from the sample. There are many different options in terms of how to go about collecting data for your study. However, this option can be grouped into the following types. One, observation. Here, you check out for specific trait or behavior of the sample in order to gain certain information. The next is interviews. This is basically one-on-one interviews using either open or closed-ended question. The next one is focus group or group interview, which takes a more or less similar fashion like that of the interview. But in this case, it's among 3 or more people, unlike the interview, which is between 1 on 1. Okay, which is usually 1-on-1 or between solely 2 people. The next one is a survey, which can be conducted via online or physical survey using a set of written down or structured questions, which could be open or close-ended question. The next one is also case study, which also takes a similar fashion like that of the observation. We take a critical look of a particular group or person out of the sample in order to gain information. The last but not least is the document and record. This is usually records or archives of information on the sample. For instance, maybe a detailed information on the prices charged by the Uber drivers and their daily routines and stuff, which are already documented. Okay, so this is another form by which we can collect information from. So basically, this outline are a number of ways or medium through which data can be collected from your sample. Note, the choice of which your data method you choose depend on your overall research aims and objective, as well as the practicalities and resource constraint. For example, if your research is exploratory in nature, the qualitative method such as interview and focus would likely be a good fit for you. Conversely, if your research aims to measure specific variable or test hypothesis, which have already been explained, large-scale survey that produce large volume of numerical data or quantitative method would likely be a better fit for you in this case. The last line of question I want to discuss in today's video is, what are the main data analysis? And this question usually pops up after one has been able to successfully collect data from the sample. Let me notify that data analysis method can be grouped according to whether the research is qualitative or quantitative in nature. So, to go with the qualitative, the popular data analysis method in qualitative research include one, that is content analysis. Content analysis basically involves categorizing content into recurring themes and discussing the meaning of words, phrases, and sentences. So for instance, within the study, I gave an example of like maybe conducting a study on Uber drivers. Per maybe an interview, you realize most of the responses that came was centered around the condition within the cars, okay, the cars of the Uber drivers. Then you can capture a theme, okay, can capture a theme for your analysis, such as maybe conditions or of the cars of the Uber drivers, okay. That is basically a typical way of doing content analysis as far as the qualitative research approach is concerned. The next one we want to consider under still qualitative research is the thematic analysis. This also involves coding and closely examining the data to identify broad themes and patterns. Then third one is also known as the discourse analysis. Here it involves studying communication and meaning in relation to their social context. Thus, understanding how people interact with each other, especially in the focus group of data collection method. Remember, as part of collecting data for specifically maybe a qualitative approach, we made mention of the focus group, okay. In such a group, you can also capture by way of trying to study the temperament or maybe the behavior of maybe the Uber drivers. How do you do that? From the focus group discussion, you get to realize that some of the drivers are very timid or very shy in asking questions or coming for in the various form of discussion, okay. So that is another way of trying to analyze a qualitative research data. The last one we want to consider is the narrative analysis. Here you analyze how people talk about their experiences. That is the story being shared by, for instance, the Uber drivers and their meaning, whether they are hopeful of a better future or they are pessimistic, okay. So that is it. So basically these are various forms of analysis that we can deploy as far as undertaking a qualitative research data analysis. On the other extreme hand is the quantitative research, okay. The quantitative research, it usually takes two forms. One is describing your data and the other is comparing your data, okay. So some of the two main popular qualitative research method are the descriptive statistics and the inferential statistics. So to start with the descriptive statistic, here you describe your data in terms of its composition and attribute, using for example maybe the mean, the median, and the mode. Let me give you a vivid example. The average number of the drivers feel satisfied by the daily wage of the income. The way of describing how your data presents itself. The next one is the inferential statistics. Here you compare groups in order to make inferences and identify potential relationship using, for example, correlation, regression, ANOVA, t-test, structural equation modeling. Okay, that is where you compare the various forms of what groups or your data, and you make deductions in order to interpret. Okay, let me be quick to say that always make sure you understand how your data looks like. Okay, that is capture the descriptive analysis in your data, because it forms the foundation, and most importantly, most inferential statistics cannot be done depending on the way a particular data looks like. So that stands to reason that you need to check how your data looks like by way of undergoing a descriptive statistic. I want to notify once again, as I've said early on, that the choice of your data collection method to use depend on your overall research aim and objective, as well as practicalities and resource constraints. So don't forget about that. Okay, so take note of that. Let me emphasize again, the choice of which data collection method to use depend on your overall research aims and objective, as well as practicalities and research constraints. And this leads us to the very last session, or very last question for today's video. How do I choose a research methodology? As already indicated several times early on, research decision or choice of research is not done in isolation, and as such, your research aim and objective have a major influence on your research methodology. So the starting point for developing your research methodology is to take a step back and look at the big picture of your research before you make any methodology decision. The first or main question you need to ask yourself is whether your research is exploratory or confirmatory in nature. Now, for example, if your research aim and objective are primarily exploratory in nature, your research will likely be qualitative, and therefore you might consider qualitative data collection methods, example being interview, and also consider qualitative data analysis methods such as content analysis. On the contrary, if your research aim and objective are looking to measure or test something, then your research falls within the realm of confirmatory, or is a confirmatory research in nature. Then what you might be considering, your research might quite likely be quantitative in nature, and you might consider quantitative data collection method such as surveys, and also consider quantitative data analysis method such as statistical analysis in the form of ANOVAs, and descriptive in the form of mean, mode, median, and the likes. Now let's note here that you should always start your research methodology decision with your research aims and objective. Why? Because that is the first point of contact where every research methodological decision emanates from. Let me quick to note that designing your research and working out your methodology is quite a large topic, which we will consider in our next video. That is how to write a good research methodology. Does this bring us to the end of today's video? And don't forget to put across all your questions in the comment section of this video below, which we will later duly address. Like and share if you found this video insightful. Thank you so much. Lastly, don't forget to like and subscribe to our page. Click on the notification bell to get alert for all subsequent episodes. Bye bye.